It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Matt Carter, Chief Executive Officer of Aryaka Networks. Matt is a cloud and technology industry veteran, leading Aryaka's long-term market strategy and day-to-day operations while guiding the company's vision for an increasingly interconnected world. Prior to this role, Matt served as president and CEO of Inteliquent, a publicly traded provider of cloud-based networking services for global enterprises. Matt previously held a series of executive positions with Sprint Corporation, including serving as president of the Sprint Enterprise Solutions Division. He also served as president of Boost Mobile, a leading provider of no-contract wireless services. Matt earned his master's degree in general management from the Harvard Business School and his bachelor's degree from Northwestern University. Matt Carter, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Matt, and wonderful on this beautiful California day where I am. I hope you're having good weather where you are. Probably a little chilly.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's all good here.
I love it. Well, listen, Matt, we always like to start to hear a little bit about the early years before we get into your current CEO status and how you've gotten there. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
So I'm the oldest of five. Grew up in Boston, son of a police officer.
I couldn't tell by the accent.
It's pretty thick at times, but
inner city, right? You're right in the city?
Yeah, I grew up in the city. My parents had migrated from the South in Louisiana.
Okay.
And landed in Boston. And so the oldest of five, and it was a wonderful childhood. And from there, ended up going to boarding school in Maine.
All right. What did mom and dad do? I think you're just begin to tell us a little bit about your dad's profession.
Dad was a police officer. He had started his career in the military and then migrated into police officer. And mom was a stay-at-home mom.
She had 5 kids.
Yeah, she had 5 kids and was very busy. But, back in those days, your parents sort of let you go outside and play, unlike today where there's a lot of, shadow parenting and things like that. But, mom had her hands full with 5 kids with baseball games, soccer, football, and all the sports activities we were all
I can imagine. Are you all pretty close in age?
So, we spread between and I think the youngest is 10 years younger than me. So I'm the oldest. Yeah. So
pretty
and
close.
There's 3 in between. Yeah. So all pretty
couple
close
years
in
apart.
Age. That's correct.
Yeah. Awesome. And what were some of the things that your parents inspired you with as you were growing up? If you think back to those days of dad being a police officer and his background in the military, mom obviously with really taking the tasks at home, what were some of those earliest memories about mom and dad?
First and foremost is that because of where they grew up, the South, they had a very strong sort of work ethic. And both parents grew up on farms. And so they had this sort of work ethic, get up very early, put in a good day's work. So early on, we all had a very strong work ethic and a discipline. Dad and mom were very disciplined. They were very structured in how they lived their lives. And so from early on, it was that. And then the second, mom and dad were very big on education. Neither one of them went to college. They both finished high school, but they had a very strong desire for all their kids to be better, be better educated. And so Dad would come home after work, and the first thing he would ask us all, he says, "Did your kids get your lessons done?" I guess they call it homework, but he called it
That's
lessons.
right, the lessons.
Yeah, did you get your lessons done? And so from an early age, it was really those two things that stuck out the most. And I would say the last thing, honestly, is that unconditional love. I mean, Mom and Dad were extremely supportive, very loving, caring. And so we never felt a lack of support and love from our parents.
Yeah, great foundations. Did all five of you go on to college?
Yes, all five of us went to college. Two went into the military, but all five and got educated with college through the military. But all of us finished college and ended up having professional careers as well.
Yeah, awesome. Were you a good student in grade school?
I think so. I was. I was
the things that you like to do, I guess,
I was
right?
very curious.
That's a good.
So I
good trait.
remember just early on, back in those days, you would have salespeople come by your house and sell you the encyclopedia, sets. And
That's right.
That was a very sort of refreshing and curious adventure for me. So it really stimulated my mind, and I took that to grade school and et cetera. Just this sort of constant questioning, constant curiosity that really ignited my imagination.
Yeah, that's a good thing to have. What about outside of class? Were you involved in sports? You'd mentioned Mom and Dad ferrying you around a bit, music, theater. What were some of your extracurricular activities?
So primarily, back in those days, the kids would all play outside, unlike today, right?
That's right.
Go outside and organize, always playing sports, basketball, baseball, hockey, football. We didn't specialize in any one sport. We were playing, sports year round. That was one piece. And then the second was that I was somewhat of a creative kid and spent a lot of time doing plays and being part of the sort of community playhouses and acting and stuff like that.
Yeah, awesome. What kind of roles did you play? Were you typically the lead? Were in the chorus? What were some of the
it's all of the above. The one thing I didn't want to play was Othello because I thought that was just too stereotypical. But other than that, I was across the board in supporting, leading, singing, dancing, any role, just have a good time. It was all about just bonding and friendship and just having a creative outlet. It was all fun and games. It was terrific.
Well, and I think those types of activities really kind of hone your presentation skills as well, right? You think those have helped you later in life?
Absolutely. You get over stage fright, I guess, so to speak.
Right.
I thought I read one day where Jerry Seinfeld said there was a question, and most people said that they fear public speaking more than they fear death. And so I never feared.
Never had that problem.
Yeah, I never had that problem. No, I enjoyed getting on stage and performing.
Walk into any room and be comfortable. That's terrific.
It was just part of the life I grew up with. Yeah.
What about entrepreneurial things, Matt? Were you involved in things that generated some extra pocket money while you were growing up?
Absolutely. So, of course, it started off back in those days selling newspapers. And
of
Boston
course, the
was
paper route.
The paper route. Boston was a big newspaper city.
Absolutely.
And so I did that to make a little bit of extra change. And then, small little things like we would sell candies and cookies and those types of stuff. Specifically the Boy Scouts, where we did those things as well. So I've always had a disposition towards trying to make a little bit of extra pocket change. Dad and Mom would give us an allowance, but it was never enough to cover the other things we would want to do. So they encouraged us, quite frankly, to go out and make a little bit of extra coin for ourselves.
What were some of those other things you spent that pocket money on?
Well, movies. Trying to woo, the opposite sex, those types of things, records. So back in the day, we were really big into music.
Sure.
And we would go to the record store and
get
look
those
at the
LPs.
top 25, songs and buy this, buy that, and stuff like that. But it was primarily records, food, and wooing, the opposite sex.
Kids miss that today, right? Because they buy everything online. Going to the record store was a social event, wasn't it?
It really was, because you sit there and you get a chance to listen to different music with other people and interact and talk about it and stuff like that. I really do believe there is a lot what the kids miss in terms of today, in terms of this social interaction. Right? Because most kids come home today, they go in their rooms. Back in my day, they come home, do our lessons, and then go outside and play until it's time for dinner.
That's right.
Right. It's a whole different sort of way of growing up.
Yeah. What about jobs? Any early jobs while you were in high school and then getting into college, things that were formative with regards to some of your work later on?
So always had a summer job and really started, outside of when I did the newspaper route and those types of what I call hustle jobs. Then back in those days, Boston would have these summer programs for various communities where you could go work around the city. And typically there were things like community-based types of jobs where we would go in, clean up certain areas, plant gardens in certain areas and things like that. So got a really good taste of just the intersection of all of Boston, working these various summer job programs. I also worked at McDonald's, worked at a grocery store. So I always had a summer job growing up in Boston. And I can remember my, first paycheck, and I thought it was a lot of money. It was minimum wage. But boy, you're bringing home $50, $60 a week. Back in those days, that was pretty good. That was pretty good coin and things. But always had a summer job, and it was really, participate in that.
Thinking back to some of those jobs and maybe some of the folks that you worked for, were there any people in particular that were inspiring to you? Maybe lessons that you learned early on that you took with you along your career?
Really good question. I don't think there's any one person that sticks out in terms of an adult. It was actually mostly the people whom I worked with who were my age, who came from different parts of the city. And, because growing up in Boston, you're kind of in your own neighborhood. And you have different perceptions about people in other neighborhoods. But sort of working these summer jobs, you met different folks and you got different perspectives and you learn different ambitions. Like folks are thinking differently than you. I've had people whom I got exposed to who were talking about certain kinds of colleges to consider that I'd never even thought about. And so I would say it was the people whom, who came from different parts of the community. And by the way, it was across all socioeconomic class lines, these summer jobs where you had these groups of people. And you just learned some different things. I got exposed to different things that I didn't get exposed into my own sort of little small world in Boston.
So you went on to college, the first of 5 to do so. How did you decide where to go and what to study?
So I ended up going to a boarding school in Maine. And how I ended up there.
And that was for high school.
That was for high school, right. And how I ended up there, my dad, police officer, did was called detail work for Senator Ted Kennedy. And it was during the time when Boston was going through busing and desegregation, and there was a lot of noise and challenges related to that. And so they just made a comment to my dad, hey, you ought to have, Maddie, that's what they call me sometimes, you ought to have Maddie consider going to boarding school. And Dad took that and ran with it and learned a lot about it and ended up applying, going to a boarding school called Gould Academy up in northern Maine. And from there was a guidance counselor who was actually from the Midwest. And because I participated in performance plays and things like that at school, he said, you ought to consider a school called Northwestern. Never heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
Heard of Northeastern. Northwestern, where the hell is that place? And so ended up applying, had zero intentions of going. And Northwestern ended up calling him up a day before the due date to accept and say, hey, we haven't heard from Matt. And he came to my dorm and said, hey, look, I think you need to go to this school here. This is a great school. And then he called my dad up, and my dad said, you're going. And that's how I ended up at Northwestern.
That's great. That's terrific. Did you go on a scholarship? Was there
no,
sports or
I
academics?
guess, back, there was a combination of, back in those days, Pell Grants and loans.
Right, financial aid.
We had so we had a combination of Pell Grants and loans to go to Northwestern.
And you were there all 4 years?
All 4 years. Loved it.
Awesome. What was the first job out of college?
I went back to Boston. And
good way to get back, perhaps, in some way.
I really love Chicago, but ended up going back to Boston, working for a company called Raytheon. They were a government defense contractor, and
they used to have a big operation right outside of here in Santa Barbara in Goleta.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. So great company, a Massachusetts institution, and essentially started off as a production assistant working on the floor, managing a union workforce.
So was your degree in engineering?
No, it wasn't. So I was a radio, TV, film major. I should have said to you that after I graduated Northwestern, I went out actually to LA to try to break into the industry like a lot of my classmates. I ended up starting off working at a Mexican restaurant, and I got a phone call one day from my dad's partner, and he said, "Hey, I'm here at the bar with your dad. He's distraught that his son, who went to Northwestern, is actually
ended up in LA.
Working at a burrito restaurant. What's the matter with you, right?"
Oh my gosh, gotta love it. And
I just remember just feeling so bad about it. It's like his partner.
How long were you out there? A month or two?
All right, so I was out there for a couple of months.
Okay.
Yeah, again, you try. That's an industry that's very much you got patience and stuff. So I ended up feeling bad. And back in those days, you would listen to your parents.
Of course.
A real job for them. For my dad was not working for, with a college degree, working for some restaurant as a waiter. He thought a real job is, how are you going to support a family? What kind of job is this? So a real job was going back to Raytheon. Raytheon has benefits. It has pension. You can go there, retire, work 30, 40 years.
Spend a whole life. Yeah.
Right. That type of, that was his mindset. And so that's how I ended up back in Boston, worked for Raytheon, and did that for 3 years.
Did he have an introduction there for you, or did you apply for the job through the newspaper?
My aunt worked at Raytheon.
Okay.
And so she was able to make an introduction to the HR person, and they were like, "Oh wow, yeah, we would love for you to come do this." And so it was by the way a great job. Learned a lot and was very appreciative of the experience working at Raytheon.
Do you remember the first time you started managing people? Was it there at Raytheon, or was it? It was there.
It was there at Raytheon, and it was it's a very good lesson in I guess early leadership for me and dealing with people, because the people I was sort of supervising were very skeptical of college people. They viewed us, I was management. They were
blue collar.
Right. They were sort of blue collar union folks, but they had a real skepticism towards folks like me. And part of your job is trying to, get them to be able to support the work, the timelines, and all of those types of things. So you learned a lot about how to talk to people, how to make them feel comfortable with you. It had some early mistakes because, you come across when you're young, you think you know everything, and you get smacked around a little bit by coming across as arrogant, elitist, Mr. Know-it-all. But over time, you started to fit in, started to become part of the crew, so to speak. It was a wonderful learning experience.
And you felt by the time you left, you had really identified with them and were very empathetic.
I did, because a lot of it, I grew up, I grew up in a working class neighborhood of Boston. So I grew up around a lot of folks that were like the folks that I encountered at Raytheon. But because I had gone to prep school, gone to a Northwestern, you get a different kind of exposure. And I think when you're young, sometimes you think you know it all, you think you're smarter than everybody else, and maybe that comes across rubbing people the wrong way. But it was an early lesson in emotional intelligence and how to connect and communicate with people that I like to think has served me, throughout my career, the good and the bad, of it all, as I've sort of learned to become better at emotional intelligence.
We all have had great bosses in the past, and like great teachers, we remember some of their names and the lessons learned. But, there's also those bosses that perhaps weren't quite as good. And my question's kind of around, what's kind of the worst lesson that you've had? Don't have to mention any names, but maybe behavior that you saw or something early on and said, oh, man, boy, I'm sure going to be different than that guy.
I had a boss who, quite frankly, was all about himself and how he talked to people.
Yeah.
It was a lot of profanity, a lot of putting down. It was just a very harsh interaction that he had with people. I mean, today.
An older person, I'm sure, as well.
Older person.
Older style.
It was. Yeah. And today, if he said those things, today's workforce,
he would have been gone. Courtroom already.
Exactly. In terms of how he talked to women and stuff like that. So I just saw how, and by the way, it was a leadership style of fear. He was able to inject his fear onto others, and it was an early lesson around, boy, one day if I'm ever in his role, I will never treat people this way.
Yeah, it's amazing. That worked for people for a very, very long time. I remember growing up, I'm a little older than you, but I remember growing up and seeing that type of behavior as well and saying, boy, oh boy, how do these people get ahead? And yet, it was so often it was behavior that was rewarded.
That's exactly right. He got the job done.
Yeah.
And that's how people talked about it. Hey, he gets the job done. But he left a lot of collateral damage in getting the job done.
A lot of things on the roll. Well, let's fast forward. You've obviously had a wonderful career. You've spent time in telecommunications. I know you serve on a bunch of boards, but just kind of give me the path that kind of took you from your early days at Raytheon, through to Coca-Cola, and looks like Bristol Myers, of course, in your background, and then getting into telecom. Give me kind of the thumbnail sketch. Did you always kind of have the corner office as your goal? Did you kind of take jobs as they come as you transferred from CPG to telecom? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's really the last. So I never had this goal of I want to be CEO or never even thought of that I would have big C-level type
corner
of
office guys.
Yeah, corner office guys. That was never a goal. It was always my. It's funny, I'm also somewhat philosophical. So to me, first and foremost, is I wanted to be happy. And I remember talking to Dad about this. He could never understand. What do you mean you want to be happy? What kind of goal is that? And it's like,
you got a job, you got a pension, right? You got health care. What more do you need?
What more do you need? Exactly. And so I always had this thought process that first and foremost, I just want to be happy. I want to get up every day and enjoy what I do and the people whom I interact with. And because I always had a creative disposition, I like thinking creatively. I love movies and plays and all of those things, but I'm also analytical in my thought process. Finding work that combined the two was very motivating for me. So hence, after I graduated from Northwestern, went to work for Raytheon, then got my MBA at Harvard, I started my career off in marketing with Bristol Myers. So Bristol Myers sort of as the classical consumer packaged goods marketing experience, knowing how to manage, launch brands, manage brands, sell them through retail, all of those things. And then from there to Coca-Cola, I view Bristol Myers as sort of like the minor leagues, giving me
the springboard.
Give me
the farm leagues before you went to the big time.
And then you go to Coca-Cola, and now you're getting kind of this global company known for marketing and branding, et cetera. And then after a while, it's like I felt like I developed some good chops as a marketeer, but I wanted to take those experiences and go into other areas where I could, be maybe disruptive and innovative. I always had this innovative thing in me as well. So in 1996, the Telecom Act of 1996, was promised as a way to open up the telecom market.
And that it did.
All these telecom companies are out there trying to figure out how to compete. Because, essentially they were monopolies, right, in their own sort of regions. And they wanted people who had worked in competitive markets. And so they thought Coke, Pepsi, that's very competitive, come on board. And I was able to join Bell South.
Fertile ground.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. And so I was able to join there, and they asked me to work on something called the Internet, which they knew nothing about. They said, all we know is that somebody up there in the D.C. area, this AOL is using our network to do all this stuff. And so I ended up being the head of marketing for our, Bell South internet service. And that got me really into the technology space. And then from there to wireless, et cetera.
And you had a little banking foray too, interesting.
I did,
right? That was kind of an interesting pivot.
So again, there was, we all can make mistakes in our career. And that was actually, quite frankly, a colossal mistake on my end, although no regrets. But only to the extent that, banking, financial services is another staid, conventional industry that needs disruption. Maybe we can bring some of that disruptive experience to banking. But no, it just
they're pretty staid industry.
It's a pretty staid industry and slow moving. So it just was not a good cultural fit for me. So hence I retreated back to telecom and wireless, et cetera.
And as I understand it, this is your second CEO assignment, correct? At Aryaka Networks.
Yes,
you had been CEO
correct.
Previously.
I was after I left Sprint, I became CEO of a company called Inteliquent, a public company based out of Chicago. And then after a successful exit with that, joined Aryaka, a 10-year-old startup software communications company in Silicon Valley. And so this is my second stint as CEO.
That's awesome. And are you based in San Mateo?
I'm based in San Mateo. Yes.
Awesome. And tell me a little bit about Aryaka now. How many employees? How many offices around the world?
Yeah, so we operate in 63 countries around the world, roughly over 350 plus people globally. More than half my employees reside in India, and maybe another 15% in Europe.
Right. Your developers mostly in India, I presume.
And we also customer support. We have all the functions there too. We have some HR, we have some marketing, et cetera. So we have actually a very diversified workforce in terms of capabilities and functions in India, and then in Europe, primarily sales, and then here in the United States, North America, we have all the various functions. So we're been around 10 years. And we are considered the leader in the space that we compete in. We really help companies who are going through this digital transformation accelerate that transformation to the cloud.
Yeah, awesome. And privately owned at the moment.
We are. Yeah, we have several investors. Goldman Sachs as one of the blue chip investors in our portfolio.
Yeah, awesome. About 400 or 500 employees, I think, overall, you mentioned.
It's over 350. We're forecasted to get to about 425 by the end of the year. So we're growing phenomenally. The biggest challenge, of course, is in a low unemployment market. It's
finding good people.
And we're being very thoughtful about the people whom we add. We just don't want to put bodies in. We want to add the right people.
Cultural fit's very important.
Yes.
Well, you and I can have a separate conversation as and when you might need us, but we certainly help you in that area. We have another client in San Mateo, the Essex Property Trust Company. We've just started a search with them. And frankly, even at the director level, we have to do national searches, right? Because it's just so difficult to find good local people that are already in the Bay Area. But as an aside, I've heard it said before that, it can be somewhat uncomfortable, particularly in the leadership role, having your answers questioned rather than your question answered as a CEO. Have you been in that situation? If so, how do you handle that?
So I think that part of being a good leader is being a good listener and being thoughtful about when you exert your opinion into the conversation. Because I learned this early on in my career in watching other bosses who felt the need to espouse their point of view, and then everybody defaulted to their point of view, and you never got the benefit of other points of views.
Right.
And so I like to. I'm not there to provide answers. Now, when I have to, I will do so if there is an impasse. But what I like to do is ask questions. And I believe asking questions help us all to get hopefully to a better outcome for us. So I'm one to try to stimulate that, because I think that we're better when we are much more inclusive than we are by we're only going to be sometimes I say I used to have a boss who always felt he had the answers and made sure that everybody knew he had the answers. We were never going to be as good as his answers. So we never, that was our ceiling, him. Yeah,
right.
So I just think that the ceiling could be higher when you actually include more people.
Yeah, no question about it. Would you say that that's kind of part of how your leadership has evolved over time? And if so, maybe some other lessons that you've learned and as you've, continued to grow in your leadership abilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I once had a boss as well. I had a lot of bosses over the years, but I used to think that, sitting at a table of folks, that it was all about, okay, we're trying to get to the right answer. And then that's really what it's all about. And he pulled me off to the side one day. He says, yes, that may be so, but you're not thinking in terms of how Joe over here is thinking or how Sue's over here thinking. You're not picking up what their motivations are. Sue and Joe are not interested in the right answer. Sue and Joe are interested in what's best for them. The lesson there, honestly, was he was asking me to take a step back, be thoughtful, be observant, understand what other people's motivations are before you go out there and overly commit your point of view, which may be in direct conflict with others. Even though your point of view may be right, part of your job as a leader is to figure out how to bring other people along.
That's right.
And so that's, I think, really how my leadership has mostly evolved. And by the way, it's still a work in progress. I'm by far a finished product. I mean, I still make mistakes every single day in dealing with people. That's why Shakespeare is actually one of my favorite authors in the world, because this dude knew something about people, about motivations.
Sure,
if you read any of his plays, his whole thing is about the motivations of other people. And so that's been part of what I think has evolved in terms of my leadership style. At the end of the day, you don't get anywhere without bringing other people along. How do you do that as a leader?
Yeah, awesome. How do you decide if it's time to micromanage or to stay out of somebody's sandbox?
I think that's the hardest thing as a CEO is to know where do you add value and where are you a hindrance. So that's why I think people say being a CEO is one of the loneliest places to be. It really is, because you come into work and you're asking yourself, where can I add value? Where am I going to be spending my time? Some CEOs like to create what's called this routine. And this gives them a sense of, okay, this is how they're adding value. And by the way, there is some benefit to creating the right kind of habits in the company to create the outcomes that you're looking for. But I try to do what Bill Belichick. So I'm going to use always these Boston sports analogies.
Oh yeah.
Bill Belichick, when they ask him what kind of football do the Patriots play, he always says situational football. But if you were to go ask Bill Walsh, the great 49er, coach, he would say we play the West Coast offense. Well, here's the difference. That at some point the West Coast offense can be defensed. And so if you're playing a certain way, a one-way approach, then you can actually put together a defense to, hopefully minimize that. It didn't always work against the 49ers, but the thought process is that people can find a way to take away your best weapon. Bill Belichick comes out and say situational football. It all depends who the opponent is. So we don't have one particular way of playing football. We adapt based upon the competition whom we're going up against that week. And so I think that's part of what I try to do in leading the organization, that there isn't just a one-way approach in how we lead and manage people. You have to be adaptable in a way that fits the situation at hand.
Yeah, no question about it. You had mentioned that Aryaka is a 10-year-old startup, and I appreciate that. And the CEO really does carry the responsibility for building the company culture. How do you do that? And what's unusual or unique about your culture?
So one of the ways is that you really do try to exude the values of what the company represents collectively. And so I have a very open style with folks here. My door's always open. I'm always walking around. I'm engaging. I send out weekly communications, making sure people are informed of what's going on. I try to really create a culture where we recognize the team and individuals who help contribute to the team. To quote John Wooden, the star of the team is the team. And so part of my approach is really about the team. How is the team performing? What elements of the team, what are the attributes of this team that allow us to deliver the outcomes that we need to achieve as a company? And so it's just things like that. I think being authentic, just being, sort of who you are. I don't try to be something that I'm not. I like to put myself out there and all my vulnerabilities, all my what's and whatever strengths, et cetera. And I think people respond more to authenticity than to you trying to be something that you're not. But the other piece that's also important, I learned this from Red Auerbach, another great Boston reference.
Right.
Red Auerbach said he used to come into neighborhoods back in the day, and I don't know, he was looking for the next great Celtic or something like that.
Right.
On the playgrounds there. But he would always say things like, the team, you're never going to get the team to perform at a high level if they don't think you care about them. So he always says, you got to show that you care about them. If you listen to those old Celtics, you hear them all talk about how the Celtics were a family. How they all supported one another. Even 60 plus years later, as teammates, they are all still together, communicating with one another. So if the people on your team don't believe you care about them, you're never going to be able to gain their trust and get their best effort going forward. So I try to make sure that this, all the folks who work with me, that they know that I care about them as an individual, as a person, more so than I care about, the next dollar that we bring in the door.
Yeah, that's awesome. Matt, what do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire?
Do they still have something to prove? Right. And so there is, and that's a competitive thing, that the person who still feels like they have something to prove is going to wake up every day and be motivated, still be curious, not take things for granted. We are paid for what we know, but it's what we don't know that actually makes the difference. And are you a person who's able to get outside your comfort zone and go explore the things that you don't know so that you can bring that back into your repertoire of the things that you know? So I always look for people who still feel like they have something to prove. I found, since coming to Silicon Valley, when I go interview people, I was trying to fill out my leadership team, the number of people I came across with who would put their feet up on my desk and lean back and say, prove to me why I should join you. All right. And so right away,
very different process.
Right. Just an entirely different process. It's like they already feel like, hey, I'm LeBron James. You got to convince me to come join you. Those are not the people whom I want. I want the person who looks across the desk from me and says, hey, I still feel like I can really, grow, but I can add a lot of value, competitive. They want to win. They want to succeed, but also they want to do it in a way that is ethical, but then collaborative, and who exude the right kind of values. For us as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Matt, you've been super generous with your time, and we've just got one last question we ask all of our guests. And, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone that's got their eyes on, say, their own corner office someday?
Great question. So you're going to come to a point in your life where you're going to be alone with your own thoughts. And you're going to ask yourself, am I all that I could be, if not for, whatever that if not for may be for you, whether you're a woman, ethnic minority, or whatever it may be. And how you answer that question will determine a lot about how you're going to move forward. If you default to that the world has done me wrong, you're singing a Muddy Waters blues tune, the world has done me wrong, then you're going to be in a position where you're blaming everybody. Right. You're going to have a lot of negativity, a lot of negative energy surrounding you. But if you take a step back and say, it's not because of my whatever ethnicity or gender. Yeah, we understand that these things are going to happen in life, that people may not give you those opportunities because of whatever. But find the optimism, the positivity and the resilience to put that foot forward and not let those things define you. Right. Right. You don't let other people define you. You define yourself. And so if I was giving any sort of advice, I would just say, love yourself. And if you love yourself, be happy, right? Man. I mean, life is short. Be happy. I mean, John Lennon, they asked him one day, John Lennon, what do you want in life? To be happy. Exactly. Yeah. And when you're happy, you can then be more optimistic and positive and not surround yourself with negativity that sort of slows you down.
Right. So true. Well, Matt Carter, CEO of Aryaka Networks, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office, and best of luck as you continue to grow the enterprise.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.